My name's Christopher Williams. I'm one of the researchers, along with Joshua Bergeman, and I also played bass tonight. I'm sitting here with a few musicians as well. Ooh. Emilio Gordoa from Splitter, and Andrea Neumann from Splitter. Josh, you've already met. This is Henrik Nurstebo and Ishiro Rosta and Amalia Dahl from the Trondheim Jazz Orchestra. And yes, round of applause. And we're here to talk to you about what just happened. This is an open question and answer session, so we don't have anything prepared for you now. We hope that you have something that you're curious about, maybe something you want to know about what we've been doing the last week, etc., etc. So let's let the games begin.
So I guess I have a question for the musicians here. The last improvisation was completely free. There was no instructions or parameters for it. How does that, or does that connect with the process of the week, the process of the lab itself?
Well, the thing, and probably interesting to say, we had a division between our lab in two different locations. The first location was rather a reverberant room, actually a church in Emauskirche in Kreuzberg. And the first thing we thought was this room will be difficult for us to listen, and actually was a surprise how with two orchestras never met was a room where it was not that hard as we thought we engaged. So the second part was here in the AdK, and so the first thing it was to recognize the new space, the distance, and basically the position of everyone as a starting point. So on that process, well, that was the main, for me at least, the main task to listen, to be able to listen across the room, because I was in one of the sides. And to recognize each voice slowly through the process. Yeah.
I think a free improvisation piece reflects very well on our process, because the group, the musicians were, we were somehow a group of researchers that had a special idea about how to do the research, and the musicians somehow were resistant towards the way of approach of researching, and I think the wish to improvise freely without getting instructions was somehow driven the whole process, so that we played a piece of free improvised music reflected very well on this process, even though during this lab we had a lot of exercises where it was about focusing on certain things. But I think it was quite important for the group to defend the space where we improvise. And that was then the case today. So we did a bit what we wanted.
I'm curious about that, the last piece. So one of the themes of the week has really been, on multiple levels, has been silence. and which voices can be heard, which voices are silenced, both musically and beyond that, and also the power of silence, actually. So a lot of the music which has been made by Splitter historically is, but also listening to you guys as well, has really made space for silence. And silence is definitely not a negative space. It's actually a very powerful presence in the music. But I wasn't hearing, and we spoke about this during the lab as well. We had quite an exercise proposed by Axel Dorner where we would try to play 50% silence, and they almost made it. But the final piece, this was not, it was very, very busy, I found. And I'm just be interested to hear your thoughts on that in relation to those discussions about silence and space.
I think the world feels quite precarious and urgent, and sort of the what's the word? Utålmodig, impatient silence. I think it was kind of maybe compressed into smaller chunks of silence, which had to somehow dissipate, I think, for me at least. Yeah, it feels kind of a little quaint maybe for me to just present these like events that I've been pre-planning and sort of insert them. It felt more like just try something and see what happens, and sort of an urgency for me at this time and place. Yeah. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think for myself, I think I was silent. I guess we can count the minutes after, but probably at least 50% of the piece I did not play. And especially in the second set, I feel the necessity to paint with a bigger brush, so to speak, because you need some kind of... My favorite settings are solo to trio formats. That's what I'm not really into large groups. But I also... Picked the wrong gig. But I also have played in a lot of different, very different large groups, and I also find it really enriching to tackle that, the challenge that it is, that you have to, like, the gestures have to be bigger to make an impact. Not always, but if the silence is not there, then you have to... I sometimes try to saturate the space by, like now I had a speaker and a subwoofer, so I could go quite loud. And I feel by doing that, like, you can also open these pockets of where like the little sounds just make more sense, because you reach, like I've said before, like kind of touching the extremes of the music, because it's really easy to end up in everything is medium dynamics, medium activity, medium. That is somehow what is the default setting of a large group. So if there is no silence that I can treasure, then I try to do the opposite somehow, but in like little blasts, and then seeing the pockets that come after it. That's my tactic personally.
It's a really interesting kind of point that, and what I find really interesting to as a viewer and a listener is the way there are no words and the way that you coordinate. And I'm wondering if you have at certain points wishes or things that you would like, I mean, when you have maybe 2 or 3 people you're playing with, it's very easy to sort of make your will or your intention for the piece go in a certain direction. And I wonder if that is something that enters your mind or your process when you're in such a large group. Like, are you trying to direct with these kind of gestures? And if you can't make such a gesture, is that a problem? Or...
Yeah, actually, I want to jump back to the other question.
Okay.
I mean, what we were that you was touching about the silence in a larger piece and the density, and I think there is musics that are with silence, others not, and context in the case of improvisation is making this determine this thing happen or not. And I think the context here is like being individually loaded by information, emotions, the audience, the space, and some people are expressing that in silence and some people not with silence, and this cancels the possibility of silence because with silence don't cancel the possibility of hearing, but with playing there is no other way back, and I don't see a problem of playing a full-on piece in a large ensemble if this is an individual voice that want that, and we are many individual voices, and if it happens there was not a silence and we like silence, well, we have to make more labs about silence, and yeah, that's what I thought.
That's really interesting, the asymmetry. Do you have any questions from the audience?
I experienced it in the context, because I think the context matters always, not just now, as a kind of really welcome working through of tensions that allowed for a multiplicity of positions. And I don't think that those of us sitting in the audience could assume what the various positions are that each of you defends in relation to this moment that we're living through. But certainly I think that we sensed that there were a variety of different ways of working through and thinking through that in relation to the work. And what I found so powerful and meaningful tonight was the ways in which you allowed the space within the practice for the working through of those tensions. Because I think we've now been, certainly in this country, less so in Norway, been living through a time in which there's been too much silencing from different angles of voices that don't match one's own. And for me, this was an exemplary exercise in how we can work things out and allow for different positions within the work. You know, I thought that the statements that you made were meaningful and important, but for me what was amazing was the relationship between understanding without knowing the details, without trying to assume too much, that there was a tension there that you were willing to work through creatively and formally, and not just at the level of who's right and wrong and who can speak and who can't. And although I think you're right about the silence, of course, not being able to prevail against sounding, at the same time, I think to acknowledge the absence of people who chose not to be present tonight was very clear, that there were people who chose not to be part of your collaboration for this evening and their chairs were empty, and I think that that's respectful and important too. I think that in this country we've developed a habit of trying to sweep silence and absence under the carpet and pretend it's not happening. And I think that those are markers. It's not literally silence, but those are markers of a decision not to engage or to engage differently or to withhold one's voice. And I was very grateful to be able to observe how you, rather than shutting the conversation down because clearly people saw things a little bit differently, or I don't know exactly what your conversation was, but I thought that that was really important, that you allowed this to be worked through the fabric of your collaboration rather than just in conversation. Sorry, it's not really a question.
No, it's right. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.
Can I ask a question of you? Was there, I love the sentiment. I'm just curious, was there anything in particular in the music that stood out in that respect? Like, was there any moment or any particular thing that happened where you thought, oh, well, that's somehow dealing with this other problem?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm the most qualified person to answer that question. I really don't have a specialized relationship to the practice, but for me, I felt it as a kind of punctuation. I felt that there was a kind of collective material to the collaboration. And what I was fascinated by were the exclamation marks and question marks, which were articulated through sound. The interjections, sometimes very punctual and brief, sometimes more, lasting. I thought a lot about punctuation during the listening, and about how those kinds of ways in which a body is interrupted punctually, and how that becomes exasperation or frustration or agreement. And of course, there's a lot of projection involved, so it would be interesting to hear what other people think. Yeah.
Maybe I go there because I'm
Yeah.
part of I was part of the thing. I think what we're trying to do there, improvising with a large ensemble of that size, we're trying the impossible already musically. And our ethos, talking about ethics, is like our aim is to allow space for everyone, which is very, very difficult, because at the same time we want to construct meaningful or kind of interesting music, with a structure and a form and interesting changes and stuff. And to achieve both at the same time is not easy, because if there's so many players, there are a lot of ideas, of course, coming up in a certain musical situation, and it easily ends up that there are too many competing ideas, and then it's more leading to a kind of a swarm movement, and you really deliberately have to counteract and to break that. And this is kind of the dilemma we're in. So we're continuously trying the almost impossible to improvise in a large group. I mean, what you can do in a trio or a quartet or quintet is, you can really construct, especially if you know each other, you can really do like almost, you could collectively compose music. But with so many people, there's always a drift. There are kind of ideas coming in that kind of destroy like a development, or kind of, and then it doesn't make sense anymore and things like that. But this is at the musical level. But now kind of processing this situation with making political statements inside of the project on stage. We arrived in a similar dilemma, because also there we wanted not to exclude anyone. Like, we wanted to have all positions, and in the end it was not possible. We tried really hard to find compromise, to find solutions that everyone gets heard, but still, although we were working a long time on it and discussing this a lot, it's sad that we didn't succeed with that, some people in the end decided not to play. Because I think for me personally, it would have been the best statement that we come as a whole group, and we built, for me, musical collaboration is also a lot about building bridges between different opinions and different backgrounds. And I mean, we're so many musicians, we come from different musical backgrounds, and we still play music together beyond that. So it's about building bridges, but also on ethical and political levels. So it's a pity that it didn't work.
I am very grateful for your comment. It's super nice what you said, and I think you got a lot of this, because of course it's a musical confrontation, and it's also more than that, and that you appreciate to see empty chairs, which says something that there was not a common sense, but that it's part of what we presented. And I just wanted to make one comment musically on this last piece, because actually I enjoyed the polyphony, because a lot of different people went through their things and just were not waiting for when do we meet, but more practicing what they wanted to say, while others said other things. And it was still transparent. I could always hear all the different subjects parallel, without anyone was just stopping because letting the other one say something. Because when we try to play silent a lot, or we try a lot to think with one brain, which is really difficult. But I'm happy that we can work with different brains, parallel, and everyone maybe feel that they could say what they wanted to say. This is also utopian, a bit.
I find it really interesting. During the lab, somebody, I think it was Simon, said that you guys, or possibly Steve, that sometimes it's easier for you to speak through the music. Like, you have these situations where people don't see eye to eye on various issues, not necessarily political, could even be just socially, other kinds of things going on. But then when you play music, it makes sense, or somehow like you can communicate, you can understand each other. And just the language you're using right now is very much the language of language. You're saying, we can speak on this subject, we can express ourselves there. And I'm kind of interested from all of you, like, what does one express with music? What makes it easier than language?
Music is a language. It's not separate.
Did you say more?
I just want to comment that, but maybe you know.
Nej. Music is music, and that's why it's beautiful. And I also find it easier to express myself through music than through words.
Short break, there is a fox. Okay, yeah, fox is gone.
Yeah, that's what I think. Music is music, and it's beautiful in itself, and sometimes it doesn't need an explanation, and maybe that's what's nice. Instead of putting a meaning into it, it can also just be music, and it can of course represent things. And I'm also pretty sure that we had a lot of talking through these days, and for you, Josh, that listened from the outside, I'm pretty sure that you could hear the process in the music also. But it's also that, it doesn't necessarily needs a meaning. It can also be meaningful in itself, I think.
Yeah, I think briefly that the strength of music is that you can read it as meaningful, and it can also be meaningless. It's very flexible. Depends on how you watch it. And I think, to me, maybe the least interesting thing is when it's like, I say this and you agree on this, and I mean, those kind of like musical conversation where everyone's like very one-dimensional, agreeing on everything is kind of less interesting than when it's more tension in it. So yeah, I think it's a flexible medium. You can read whatever you want into it, and I think that's one of the main strengths.
Did anything like that happen tonight? This, what you're talking about, this not call and response, but this actual...
Yeah, I think for me, like when playing, I was constantly moving in and out of different ways of interacting and listening, and sometimes agreeing, sometimes thinking, no, maybe something else, try this, no, that didn't work, shit, what do I do now, wait, try something else, I mean, it's, it's like a constant viewing the thing from different angles and trying to do something that's good. Yeah.
In those situations, who are you communicating with? Is it other individuals? Is it with the band? Is it with the music itself?
Music itself, other individuals, the band, the world, yeah, everything. Just trying to make sense of anything, anytime, hopefully.
Just what you were saying made me thought about vulnerability, and as an ensemble with many people, with actually 2 ensembles that met for the first time here, because with different backgrounds and different practice in a way. I mean, we all come from a ground that we call it improvisation, and we make granted this is the same thing for everyone. Well, it's obviously very individual. So I have a question more to the audience about this fact of vulnerability and how it's perceived when you go to a concert, you pay your ticket, or you get on the guest list, and then you sit down and listen, and it's like a thing that you are expecting they are there for you to, or for the cosmos, whatever, to listen something. How is for you this factor? Or do you see release complete something, or you see musicians, humans, vulnerability on stage? What do you perceive? This is something for you.
Vulnerability on stage.
Yeah.
That's what I see. Vulnerability on stage. No, I don't need this. It just says vulnerability on stage. That's it.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
And
You're professional musicians. You've been doing this for 40 plus years. You shouldn't be vulnerable anymore.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that.
Love you, but we're all vulnerable.
We're not professional.
Not musicians.
no, thank you for this comment. Yeah, that's okay. So this is already an answer. So yeah, you see, okay, I go to a concert. There is people that are offering something that is prepared, and yeah.
Yeah, I think the longer I'm doing it, the more vulnerable it gets, because it's, I mean, there are different ways of developing music, you know, towards like more professional and more slick, that you can make like convincing shows. But this kind of music is a lot about, like, it feels like stripping naked, and it's like, I find it the most risky thing to do, and I'm still sometimes scared to go on stage after 35 years of doing it, after 1,000 concerts. It's like, it is like this. It's about that also. It's and it feels like it's a bit like cheating to kind of repeat what you did because you remember it worked so well. You always have to open up and face kind of the situation that comes up, and it's always anew and it's endless, I think also.
I think that's a mythology. I think that, as the musicologist Ben Pickett talks about this. He says, well, you know, improvisers make a big fuss about the fact that they're going on stage and are risking everything every time because they don't know what's going to happen. But
not everything.
Imagine a 14-year-old getting up at music camp and performing the Sibelius Violin Concerto. That's fucking risky. That could really go badly.
But it's a very different kind of risk.
It's true, but I think a lot of we often make a fuss about this though, because we're working with materials that we know like the back of our hands. We're working with people in this case that we know, some that we don't, but there's familiarity with the context that's very much ingrained.
But we don't know about the other people's ideas, so the situation is always new. You can be like very developed with your material and your ideas, but the situation is changing. So you're confronted with other people's ideas, and it's not about like cutting through with what you've learned and trained, but to be ready to develop and do something new in a new context.
It's true, but the bandwidth is limited. The bandwidth of what can actually happen.
Of course it's limited. Of course it's
I
limited.
disagree.
Yeah.
I think there's also, now it's my turn. I think there's also a lot of, like from my side, there's very often a lot of trust also involved, so that it's not so much risk because there's trust. But today I have to admit I felt very vulnerable. Is this the word? And I lost a little bit the trust, but we kind of worked it out. But this was, for me today, the situation.
But I think this comment is...
There's a question over there, and then we'll go here.
No, it's at the... Because I don't think at all that we're always improvising in this setting or in our other groups. If you truly... Because I think if you're... And this term free improvisation doesn't mean anything anymore, because most of us are not freely improvising. I mean, improvisation is always based on stuff you've done before. It's this kind of the same as talking in a way. So you have learned a language and you're using it, but I think in very many settings we never reach a vulnerable stage where we actually do stuff that there's any risk connected to. And I think that's especially in a large group, that's like the big win moments where stuff happens, like combinations that we've never done before. And then I feel like someone brings something to the table where I really have to dig deep and improvise to kind of... Yeah, sometimes I'm in awe of what's happening, and then I feel like if I'm going to respond to this, it better be good. And that's the moments where I feel I really improvise. And I'm not so interested in... I don't need to improvise all the time, because it is like composition and improvisation, if you put those two things as like the... And there's so much in the cross-section, but that's... I feel I'm composing just as much as I'm improvising in this group. So I think it's a good question, are we actually opening up for true vulnerability? Probably not so often, but sometimes. And these outer music, we've had these discussions that are it affects the music, but it's also outside the music, but it's still connected to us. And that, I think, affects our playing much more than any musical statement can do. So it's super interesting.
Go to the question.
Mm. I'd be interested, how do you tackle power dynamics in this big group where there are amplified electronics and more difficile flutes? I mean, how do you solve this tension in the concert and before the concert through communicating? I mean, there are two groups coming from different backgrounds, joining together, and I'd be really interested, how do you work through these emotions that are coming up while playing?
I think that's very much about the trust that was mentioned before. And now I have to say that I haven't been here the whole week. I came on Monday. So I don't know if you talked more about it, but I think it's about the trust. And I think the first day I came, I felt a bit that I restricted myself very much, because I play an instrument that goes very through everything. You can hear it. I kind of felt that everything I played, everybody could hear all the time. But then you have to trust that the loud people will also be quiet at some point. And I also think that they were the loud people. I'm one of them. I really try to be quiet. Yeah, and I think that's about the trust.
Okay.
No, I go.
So we get more space for you. Yeah.
No, with this, with the power dynamic, I think it's very interesting what you said. For me, for example, like the second set was highly frustrating for me. I got really depressed over it because for me the sound was always very saturated, and then you get in this state like quiet instruments. They have this tendency, they feel a bit like, I'm a victim, I need to express myself. And so when the dynamic goes a bit down, then the quiet instrument, this is my moment, now I'm gonna shine. And what happens when this dynamic happens, everything gets saturated. And I was feeling, I'm a victim. But I didn't want to go into this dynamic, so I was waiting and waiting, and I was watching my clock also, and at minute 26 I played for 80 seconds or something, and then later I had another minute, but overall I felt there's no space here really for me. I could have ironed my shirts at home instead, and but this is, yeah, these conflicts are there, and they are not necessarily solved, not in the political thing, what we talked before, because you said it's good that the seats were there and people couldn't leave, but I have to say it's shit that the three people were not there. And also within the music, it's sometimes there's not space for everybody, and that's also shit. But we try, and yeah, we're gonna. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. There's definitely a theme, I think, over the week, the sense that we're in a process and it's never really finished, that there's failures, but the failures are not final, and there's successes, and the successes are also not final. I think we have time for one more question, and then we're probably going to have to wrap up.
I have a question about individuality and collectiveness. How do you see this tension between collectiveness and individuality in this kind of setting in a large ensemble? Very subjectively, without judging, I saw a lot of individual actions, or heard a lot of individual actions, but also collective actions. For me, the most individual action, the most extreme one, was one player leaving the stage and playing from behind, without judging it. So I'm interested in how you see that, or because also when you talk now, I hear a lot of individual sentiments, and I'm interested in how you see how you're interested in the whole collective versus the individual interests of each player while playing.
I think I have a short. It's not directly answering the question, but I think it's also important to know that the concert is just 2 hours or less than 2 hours, but it's a little moment in a longer process. So that's also like, there has been moments with more space over the week, and it's sometimes kind of random if that happens in the concert or not. If there is, yeah.
Maybe answering from my side what you just asked. So the threshold of not knowing what's gonna happen and accept it is quite big. So there is also room for anarchy or really different actions connected to sound, or not necessarily with sound. And through years, we got already surprises that will make us feel more flexible and somehow. So if someone decides to take over for 5 minutes and play super loud and cover everyone, we welcome it in a way. And it's based on what we said before. We trust it, and we think this will also go to an end. Or I mean, so far we didn't happen something that someone just blast for 40 minutes and not allowing anything. But even if so, I feel personally like very welcoming all these kind of actions on stage, especially in this context of voicing and improvising what you have to say. Yeah, that's I think I see it like that. We build this threshold, and everything is, not everything, but many things are welcome to happen.
I think this is sort of in parallel to what you said about wishes while playing, Josh. We sometimes wish the music would be such and such, and for me, I haven't at any point wished for anyone else in the music making thing to do anything specific, and I think that's a way of dealing with individuals and the group together, to sort of let the group change with what the individuals are doing, instead of sort of hoping and wishing and suddenly trying to direct things into a pattern that you like aesthetically. And I think in a way there's a conflict between like aesthetics and making things sleek and stylish and beautiful, and letting the group end up where it wants. And I think that's one of the main struggles of this, and also what makes it interesting and good.
Okay. Thank you for a very... Sorry, did you have a comment?
I just wanted about this individual and collective thing. I think what happened very often is like you have an idea, an individual idea, and you propose it, and then some people hop onto this idea, and then you become a group. And this also happened today very often, so that like there's one suggestion or one proposal, and then all of a sudden it's a group. And this is very beautiful, actually. So this I enjoy a lot. So the individual becomes a collective thing.
Thank you for a very interesting discussion, very interesting questions. Yeah, it's been quite a ride. If you want to discuss more and hear more about the project, tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock at the Haus der Berliner Festspiel, we're going to have a panel discussion with we've got 3 wonderful guests who have much more deeply thought views than I have on this topic. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And so please come along and tell your friends.
Who are the guests?
The guests are Professor John Sutton, Professor Michael Wheeler, and Dr. Nanette Nielsen. So a cognitive scientist, a philosopher, and a musicologist. And they're going to speak on the topic of improvisation and ethics, answering this concert in a sense, but also elaborating it to connect with other themes in their work. So it'll be a very interesting discussion.
Yeah.